If you'd like to be able to listen to the show without ads and have full access to bonus content, that's an option. To find out how, please go to dogmanencounters.com/podcast. Tonight's guest is Donna Hough. Donna, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's great having you. Thank you for your time. Donna, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Okay. I'm a woman in my 60s, and I love all kinds of animals, every animal in the world. And I've had pretty much a lifetime of different types of paranormal experiences. And so because of that, I kind of got used to them and basically had no fear of most things. Of course, until this happened, this was entirely different. And that's why I decided to reach out to you, because you had helped so many other people, and I thought it was time for me to reach out. This was different, not something I could just deal with like any other thing.
It sure was different. Yeah, I mean, life can prepare you for pretty much almost anything, but having an experience like this, yeah, you're definitely never prepared for it. So that's understandable. Donna, you're living in Arizona now, but you're living at a property in California where you had your encounter. What can you tell us about that property?
Well, the area where I live now is in Arizona, and it's very rural. But the experiences that happened back in 2000 was actually where we had left our property here to do a job for a man that lived in Southern California. And we spent 6 months living there, even though we still had our place in Arizona. We spent 6 months living there. So that's actually where it happened. And it was a part of Southern California that is actually secluded in comparison to a lot of Southern California, because there's a lot of orchards there, primarily avocado orchards. So even though you do have suburbs near each other, it's choppy. There's a house, a lot of orchards, and then a house and a lot of orchards, that kind of thing. So that's kind of like the geographic description of the area. And it's hilly. It's in the upper hills. It's not down in the valley, and it's not along the beaches. It's inland, and it's right along the edge of the mountains, the San Bernardino Mountains, the Los Angeles mountain ranges, that area of Southern California. So it's not that far from the mountains. And that's basically the geographical description that I can give.
Yeah, sounds like a beautiful area. It's just a shame you have to have an experience like the one that you're going to tell us about tonight. You still wonder to this day if what you experienced years ago was a dogman that paid you an unwanted visit or some kind of a haunting. Which one would be worse in your opinion, though?
Dogman. Dogman. Without a doubt. That's the worst. That's why when I realized that's what it was, that I could cope with a haunted house. As terrorizing as it was, I could always say my prayers, and this dogman would be worse, way worse.
Yeah, I figured you would answer it that way. What kind of an effect has the encounter you're going to tell us about tonight had on your life, Donna?
Since I recognized that it actually was Dogman, I have had a real hard time. It actually did a lot. It affected me because we go in and out of denial. Like, no, that's not what it was. But then I had to finally contact you because I knew that you were very experienced, that you knew. And if it wasn't Dogman, you would tell me, oh, no, Donna, yeah, you're right. It wasn't that. But you validated that, yeah, it was one of these guys, all right. But even before you verified to me for my own mind, I couldn't process it. I would go back and forth. I would go from, no, that wasn't what it was, to, yeah, that's the only thing it could have been. And thinking that, like I said, a haunting would be so much better to just say, oh, there's a haunted house hundreds and hundreds of miles from here, and I never have to go back there ever again. But that's not the case. It's something else, and it's something that can be anywhere, anytime on the planet, anywhere. And that's not good. I mean, when I thought it was just a haunted house, hauntings, I was hundreds of miles away from it. So I'm here, and I could go outside at night, look at the stars, look at the beautiful moon. In the summertime, I could open my windows at night and sleep with the windows all open. But then after I realized what it was and that it could be anywhere, anytime, and then I don't go out. As soon as that sun peaks the top of the mountains to the west of me, I am indoors, and I don't care what noise I hear. I don't care what. I don't go outside for nothing till that sun rises in the morning. And I never sleep with my windows open anymore. I have the screen, and then I have like that hardwire. It's not bars, but it's a caging type material that's on my windows. So the cats cannot scratch and get out and go get killed, right? But it would never stop a Dogman from tearing the window right out of the wall. And so I don't sleep with my windows open anymore, even though I just open the windows and let the breeze flow through at night and sleep peacefully. But now I have a higher electric bill because I run the air conditioner in the summer at night. I don't open my windows anymore at night. So, I mean, if I just shut the windows, I'm going to have to run the AC, because here in Arizona where I live, you can't sleep inside without the windows open at night unless you have the AC on. And even though I live in the northern part of Arizona where it actually snows in the winter, but it still gets really hot in the summer, and sometimes humid because of the monsoons that come in the summer. So it's not comfortable at night in the summer if you don't have the AC on, if your windows are closed. So I can't sleep with the windows open anymore. And I just make sure all the drapes are shut up. I can't see out. Nothing can see in. So, I mean, it's put a fear in me. It's put a definite fear in my lifestyle. But since you told me when we talked the 7-word mantra, but it didn't want to hurt me. I say that out loud even. I say it in my mind and I say it out loud. That helps a lot, because it so easily could have hurt me, but it didn't. I was right within its grips, and it didn't. So I would say it affected me a lot as far as lifestyle choices. If I have an appointment in town with somebody and their doctor or whatever, and they say we're going to schedule it for 4:00, I'll say, nope, can't do it, because it means I'll be driving home in the dark. Won't do it. Won't drive home in the dark. Won't pull into my property at night, get out of the car and walk from the car to nope, not doing it. I'm not. Yeah, lifestyle choices have changed a great deal. And I've never been afraid of the wildlife out here, whatever there might be out there. I don't worry that I'm going to get hurt by the local coyote group or no. I mean, no, it has changed a lot of the way I live or choose to do things.
I can understand how it would change the way you live your life. But please do remember those 7 magic words that I told you, and as long as you remember them and keep saying them to yourself, that will definitely help snap you back to reality so you can deal with this in a healthy way. But if you're ready now, and there's no rush to do it, but like I said, if you're ready to tell us about your encounter now, please do so. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Okay. Well, it all started when Paul accepted a job offer, and this was going to be in Southern California, and we lived in northern Arizona, and so it was not something we wanted to do, but it was really good pay, and for that time era. Maybe not so much for the 2024, but for 1999, it was really good. And the idea was that we didn't want to go to work somewhere where we were going to have to pay rent because we were going to have to be there for 6 months. But the man said, okay, but we got this guest house and you can stay in the guest house the whole time. So you can stay right on the job site and the pay will be the same, everything. So I wasn't working. Paul didn't have anything going on at the time. So it was like, yeah, let's do this. So we went there. It was November of 1999, and we had Thanksgiving, and the very following Sunday, we took off and went there so that we could start work on Monday, the very Monday after Thanksgiving. So we had a Volkswagen hippie van that we used to like to travel around in, and it was set up really nice in there with a really good bed and certain creature comforts in there. It was really cool. And anyway, so we drove in it and we went over there and we got there and it was a really nice area with a lot of homes up there it was in the Heights. So it was really nice homes up there, but they were spaced far apart from each other. And there was like avocado orchards everywhere and hilly areas. And it was up in the hills, not up in the mountains, but it was on the hills before you get up to the mountain range. And it was very beautiful. And the guest house was, oh my God, I should have been happy. Because if I had $1 million or $1 billion to build my dream, I would build it just like that guest house. And I would put the landscaping and everything like it was, because it was just like a fairy tale land. Beautiful flowers and nasturtiums along the trails. And oh gosh, it was gorgeous. And you never felt like you were near a city because it was so secluded. But I was real happy. Guest house was so nice. So we got there on that Sunday. And we got everything ready and moved into the guest house. Wanted to go to bed early that night because you know how it is. If you're going to start a new job next morning, you want the boss man to be impressed. So Paul was all about doing the best he could. He was a good worker. So he needed to get to bed. And so we went to bed. And in the middle of the night, I woke up in terror. Like I have never known. I have never known this terror, this level where I couldn't even breathe. I mean, I was being suffocated like I had an elephant on my chest, and I was like shook into the very core. And I was like just praying, oh Lord, Lord Jesus, Lord, all the prayers in the world wasn't taking that terror out of me. And I thought, okay, this is okay. This is a passing thing and I'm going to be okay. And I didn't understand. And I thought, am I having a heart attack? Is this what a heart attack feels like? But, I decided to just stay calm. I didn't want to disturb Paul. He was sleeping peacefully. So I just finally got to where I could rest and fall back to sleep. And then I couldn't sleep for more than 10 minutes and I'd get awoke again with I can't even, there isn't even a word, you need a new word for the word terror. Because there's no word that I can think of that could describe what it felt like. And it was all, there it was again, everything all over me again. And I was like, what is happening? What is happening? And I felt like, okay, there's a demon in this house. There has to be some demonic thing in this house. This house is a demonized house. Because, my background, thinking everything that goes bump in the night that's evil to this degree is from hell. It's not just a wandering spirit or a ghost. This is beyond any ghostly anything I've ever. So I'm thinking this is a haunted house with a haunt. And I'm like, oh gosh, and I'm just praying. And then I finally got to sleep that night. But then about 2 or 3 in the morning, I can't remember. I don't think I even looked at the clock, but it was after I'd gone to sleep and finally was starting to sleep and getting good sleep. All of a sudden, Paul and I both were woke up by rapping on the windows and rattling of the doors. And the doors of the guest house were like the kind that open. There's 2 doors together, and I think they're called French doors. There's 2 doors together, and they have all these window panes in them, and they're really cool windows. And they open up. Both doors will open up or just one, and all these window panes. And it was rattling like someone had a hold of the doorknob, just shaking and shaking violently, just violently. And we're laying there, and Paul said, just stay in bed, just stay there. And I don't know if he had something in his head, like a plan, if something broke through, like if a person broke through there, if he had a plan in mind of, like, if there was going to be an invasion or something. I mean, he had a lot of experience in survival at Vietnam. So I was thinking, okay, it's going to be okay. And I was praying for protection from whatever it was. And it just rattling and rattling. And then there was windows next to the bed that were kind of, magical storybook window types that opened out and to the beautiful rose bushes and bougainvillea. And it was really magical, but there was tapping, and we had the mini blinds pulled down, and I was like, well, what could get through all those bushes to get up to the window to start tapping on the window? And we just went, okay, we're just going to lay here. And finally it stopped. And, it was like, that was so crazy. That was just so crazy. And we're like, okay, it doesn't make sense that a person would, come from the main road and walk down the hill down to where the guest house was just to pick on people. I mean, I don't even know how many people would have even known it was there, but because it was secluded in the trees. But anyway, that just freaked me out. So the next day, went around our business. Day went pretty good, and that night when we went back to bed, it happened again. So all of a sudden, I feel like there's an elephant on me, and I'm thinking this horror, terrible, terrible. I can't explain this fear. And then there's all the rattling and banging on the doors and terrible rattling and shaking. And I was like in shock that the panes in the glass didn't break. And the tapping on the window, and it was like just, again, we just laid there, and then we talked about it. And I said, you know what, Paul, this house is haunted. This house has to be haunted. And he agreed with me in that because, Paul had enough experiences that he was like, okay, yeah, that could very well be. So I said, can we just sleep in the van? Sure. So the next night we slept in the van, and we would take advantage of the creature comforts of the cabin during the day. But at night we would go into the van to do our sleeping. Well, so it would have been the second morning. So the second morning that we were there, which I guess would have been Tuesday morning, maybe. Yeah. Anyway, so the boss man was walking by. I don't want to say his name because he's a pretty prominent name. So he came walking by, and he looked oddly at me, and he said, "Did you sleep in your van?" And I was like, "Yes." And he was, "Well, is there anything wrong with the guest house? Is it too cold in there? Do you need more blankets? Do you need a heater?" And I said, no, it's fine. It's just, he said, "Well, why are you sleeping in your van then?" And I didn't want to say it, but finally I was like, you know what? I got to tell him. So I said, well, the guest house is haunted. It's haunted. He looked at me, but the way he looked at me was not like in surprise, like, whoa, it wasn't like that. What I could gather was that he'd heard that before. And he said to me, well, did my wife tell you? Because his wife wasn't there anywhere around at the time for different reasons. But anyway, he said, did she tell you what happened in that house? And I said, no, nobody talked to me about the house at all. And he said, okay, all right. And then he went on about his business, like, okay, whatever. But what I gathered from that was the way he acted was that he probably heard stories from her, but because it was his wife, he probably just disregarded it and thought, oh, well, whatever. But now hearing it from an outsider made him stop, it gave him pause to stop and say, what is, because he was not shocked to hear somebody say that guest house is haunted. Well, later on that afternoon, the son and daughter-in-law have come to visit. And later on that afternoon, the daughter-in-law introduced herself to me and everything. And she says, oh, by the way, boss man, she doesn't call him boss man, I do. By the way, boss man told me that you told him about the guest house, that the guest house was haunted. And I said, yeah, I told him. And she said, wow. She said, is it like you're so terrified you can't breathe? Like something's on your chest? And I'm like, yeah. And she goes, and the doors rattle and stuff? And I'm like, yeah, exactly. And she goes, whoa, yeah. And she goes, yeah, I can't sleep in there. When we come to visit, we can't stay in there. We stay at the main house. And daughter can't either. Their daughter, when she comes, she won't stay in there. We won't stay in that guest house. And I'm like, okay. So then I'm thinking, so the guest house is haunted. So I wasn't wrong. There is something about that and they know it. So I thought, well, there it is. So I just went on thinking I was connected to a haunted house and that we were staying in a haunted house. That's what I thought. And all the time that I would take advantage of in the daytime, because I was writing and I would go in there and sit down at the table to write. Well, Paul would go up the hill to the grandma's house where most of the work was. He would go up there and be working. And unless he needed me for some specific things, I would stay down below and I would do my writing and I, would just be staying there at the guest house during the day. And I would try to take walks in the orchards and stuff, but there would be tapping even in the day. And a lot of those Southern California houses, when they're in the hills area, they're built off of a slope. So the way this was that the front part of the house where you come up the road and you come up to it, it's kind of up on a level. But if you're on the outside of the cabin, you have to walk downhill to the back of the cabin because it's built up above the ground on, I don't know what you call that, but I'm sure people are familiar with that when the whole house is not on level ground. So the bedroom windows and the kitchen and bathroom windows were up high. The front windows were average ground level style windows, but to the back, the windows were up high. So I never had a problem with leaving those windows open for air and ventilation, the bathroom window and the kitchen window. But I would be sitting at the table at the kitchen area doing my writing and stuff and some bookkeeping style work and stuff that I could do, of my own. And then there'd be some rattling at the door and some tapping on the glass. And I would totally ignore it because I knew who was home and who wasn't. And I knew that the boss man wasn't there and daughter wasn't there, son-in-law and daughter-in-law weren't anywhere around, and nobody should be doing that, and I wasn't going to go checking it out. But when it would stop and I would have to go around and pass those doors so I could go around to get to the bathroom area, I had to walk by there, and there was slobber on the window. Slobber's all over the glass. And I'd be like, what's with this slobber? And I open the door and look, and it would be up high, like I'm 5'2", and I would have to stand and stretch and reach my hand up as high as I could to touch the top of the front door frame. So somebody would have to be pretty tall to get slobber up there on the glass so high up. And I was like, what is this slobber, like mucus stuff? And then I thought, oh, I've heard of ectoplasm. Maybe it's ectoplasm. That's what I thought. I had to come up with an idea, of what it could be because I was trying to figure it out. And since it's a haunted house, why not be ectoplasm? So that's what I was thinking. So then I would clean the window and go back to what I was doing. And this happened all the time. It kept happening. And then, another thing that would happen was when I'd be there, in the back of my head, I would hear this voice. This was inside my head. And it would say, turn around. And I wouldn't. I think, well, I don't know where that came from. And I guess you would kind of call that mind speak, but I'm not sure. I couldn't be positive of that. But then it would go, there is someone standing behind you. Turn around. Look at me. And I'd be like, oh my God, every hair on the back of my neck would stand up and I'd get a chill down my back. And I'm like, oh my God, that's just, that's just no. I just can't, but I thought, okay, ghost. Okay, ghost. Yeah. Whatever. I'm not turning around. I'm not going to listen to that. But it happened every day, several times a day, every single day. And it especially would happen when I would go into the bathroom. Anyway, so, it was even to the point where if you had to go to the restroom in the middle of the night, you would hold it and I would go in the day. When we got up in the morning, I'd go because I didn't even want to leave the van to go inside to use the restroom. Make sure you got to get your potty in done before we hit the van. Yeah, it was so bad. But anyway, so every day Paul would come back and I would show him the slobber on the window and he just kind of go, with his tongue in his cheek, like, like he's trying to figure out it too. Like, well, somebody's doing it. But we thought, well, we don't know. But when I would go, I would want to go for a walk in the beautiful orchard, and there was like the trail with the nasturtiums growing on either side and wildflowers and just beautiful. But I always felt like I was being followed. But they had a little bulldog, kind of a little bulldog named Rocky, that was not a big pit bull type, but kind of a smaller version of a pit bull. But when Rocky would walk with me, I felt like it was okay. And, Rocky hung out a lot with me when I was there and it made it nicer. And they had all kinds of cats, but their cats and Rocky would disappear. Like she'd get a cat. They loved animals too. And the daughter-in-law would come and she'd bring a cat and her cat would just disappear. There were several of them. Feral, Diablo, Oblio, Bagheera, Monkey, there was Adolfo was a beautiful calico and they would just disappear. And you would go looking for them and they were just gone. They never showed up again. And eventually the little dog Rocky disappeared and nobody ever knew what happened to Rocky. And that was just kind of a mystery. Oh, and there was a cat. Paul named the cat 83. He said it took 83 cats to get that cat with all those colors. So, yeah, all these animals were disappearing without an explanation. And they said, oh, well, it's probably coyotes. There might be coyotes in the orchard or coyotes come down from the hills. But I accepted that. I said, okay, yeah, but where I live right now, we have coyotes. And I have been woken up in the dead of night from coyotes catching something. They are loud. I mean, they're like, rah, 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 rah. They go into a frenzy and they are so loud, they're loud enough to wake the dead. And you would have thought that if it was coyotes getting their animals, that you would have heard something. But never, ever did we ever hear anything or any signs of coyotes. But yet that was the accepted explanation for why the animals disappeared. Anyway, so this went on. And finally, see, people that I know, and I mean, would tell me you could expel an evil spirit from a house. Well, that's true. And I believe that you can. And I've had experiences doing that. But there is something that you have to do. And if you don't do it, and I don't want to get religious on people, but it's right in their Bible. When a wandering spirit goes wandering the earth, looking for a house to move into, and it finds one and it moves in, if you cast it out and you don't replace it with what needs to be replaced, then it will come back. When it sees the house empty, it'll come back in and bring 7 worse than it was with it. And I've seen that played out in life. That was something I didn't share with you earlier, but yeah, I've seen it played out where something happened and the person didn't, and then it got worse. So there was no way that I was gonna, even though I believed that at the time it was an evil spirit, I was not gonna cast it out and then drive merrily home to Arizona, leaving these people with a swept clean place, if you know what I mean. So I was just gonna tolerate it and just keep myself and Paul protected until it was all over. And then one day he said he's going to take that Saturday off and we're going to go somewhere and do something. And I was all happy. And so the Friday night came and we were going to go out to eat when he got done. So I went to get ready and be completely ready. So when he got home, all he had to do was shower and get ready. So I went into the bathroom, and the window was high up from the ground because it was towards the back of the house. And so I always had that window open, and it was a wide window that went up and down. So I had a stick basically to hold it to keep it from falling closed. So I had it open because it got stuffy in that bathroom. So when you first walk in the bathroom, to your left is the counter mirror, a big long mirror, and to the right is wall, nothing but wall, and the door bumps into the wall. The space between the edge of the counter and the window are basically the width of a door. So it's a narrow area. So I went in there, got my shower and stuff done, and when I got out of the shower and I went to the mirror, and I'm looking in the mirror, you're going to dry yourself off and comb your hair and all that. I'm looking in the mirror, and there's these two huge werewolf claws in the mirror. I was looking at that and trying to process it. And I get nauseated. I'm literally getting nauseated right now, just even talking about it. But at the time, being a believer in ghosts, having a mindset, this was a haunted house and nothing else. That's what it is. Having that mindset, I'm looking at the mirror and I'm thinking, okay, ghost, now you're going to show me something inside the mirror. And I'm thinking that to myself, and I'm like, but I'm still befuddled. I'm confused, and I'm just trying to figure this out. It's like, and I was thinking, my brain was saying, this is inside of the mirror. And it looked like they were trying to come out of the mirror and grab me. They were in that position, two ungodly, horrible werewolf hands on the wrist. It just was like they were coming, and I thought they were coming out of the mirror, like they were inside the mirror in another dimension, like Alice in Wonderland falls in and out of a mirror, like that. I mean, I was literally thinking that way, which is a crazy way to think, but that's literally how my brain was processing this, that this thing is going to reach out from inside of the mirror and grab me. And it was clearly werewolf. I mean, there's nothing else in the world that it could have been. That's the only thing it could be. There was no other hands that ever could. And I didn't watch werewolf movies. I saw The Wolfman with Lon Chaney Jr., but that's about it for me for watching werewolf movies. But I still recognize that this can only be werewolf. It just can't be anything else. And I'm looking at it and I was like, okay, what in the world does a werewolf have to do with a haunting? This doesn't make sense. This just doesn't make sense. How can, I mean, yeah, what? And I'm like, what is the spirit trying to tell me? Are they sending me a message? Wait, maybe they need help. Maybe they're one of these spirits that's haunting, trying to get answers or help. Maybe, and I'm going through all these questions in my head because that's just what my head was doing. And I was thinking about what in the world, what message would come from a werewolf? I mean, what does this have to do with anything? This is completely bizarre. What the heck? And I was just tripping on it. I was just, I'm just stammering and looking at it and trying to process it and thinking, how can this be? I guess there really can be things in another dimension through the mirror, through the looking glass. Maybe when Lewis Carroll wrote Alice in Wonderland, there was something to that. This is still how I'm thinking. I'm still thinking that way. But, I hear the van. I come out of the bathroom and Paul's coming down. He comes in and I'm going to show him and it's not there. And I'm trying to explain it to Paul. And he's like, oh, okay. He's going, I don't know. And I'm sitting like, well, I don't want to leave you. I want to be. So I stayed there in the bathroom while he took a shower because I didn't want to leave his side. I didn't want to go out and sit out. I didn't want to be away from him. So at that point, I thought, this is too much. This is just too much. And I was so scared and frantic that I told Paul, I said, I can't stay here anymore. I got to go home. And he was very understanding. And he said, okay, that's fine. If that, you don't have to stay. So at that point, When I talked to you before, I said bus. I don't know why I said bus. My brother and I have a joke about one time I called Jack Nicholson Robin Williams by accident. Well, I told you I got on a bus. It wasn't. It was an Amtrak. So Paul took me down to the station. I got on a train, came back to Arizona, and I was happy. I missed him, but I was so happy. I was never so glad to be away from a place in my life. I could breathe easy. I just felt safe at home. Everything was fine. But then after a few days, the boss man called me and said, please come back because we need you. Paul needs you here. There's aspects of the job that we need you to do. And Paul isn't focusing well without you here. He's worried about you. And I'm like, oh, okay. So he talked me into coming back, and I didn't want to, but I did. Got back on the train, went back, and I finished up, and we got done in the middle of May 2000. So we started in November of 1999 and it finished in May of 2000, and got all the loose ends caught up and took off and came home, and I was so happy. And I never, ever, 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 ever wanted to ever go back there again, ever. So time goes on, and I'm thinking, I tell my brother and a few other people about the crazy haunted house, and, whoa, that's weird and everything. Well, I had a friend, a few years later, this friend, and what we would do is sometimes at Halloween, we'd all get together, and this one Halloween, she came here. Now we're back in Arizona, in our property in Arizona, and this friend of mine brought her daughter and son-in-law, and since we're remote and everything, we could build a fire and roast marshmallows and all that. So we're doing that, and we decided to sit around the campfire and tell ghostly stories because it's Halloween, but we have to be true. So we each told a story, and then her son-in-law, we said, well, do you have a story? And he said, well, I don't have a ghost story, but something weird did happen to me once. And so we're like, well, just tell us. So he didn't want to, but finally he said, okay. So he lived in Louisiana as a kid. He went as a Boy Scout to a camping trip. And one night he had to get up and go to the restroom. He got out of his tent and he went. And then when he came back, there was a werewolf standing there, just standing there looking at him. And to this day, I wish that I would have drilled him. I wished I would have asked all kinds of more questions, but we were all stunned because this was a true story. He was supposedly telling us a true story. And we were like, well, that's it for tonight. Nobody's ever going to top that one. You won the prize. And then somehow or other, we wound up talking about other things. But now I wish I would have asked him a lot of more questions, but at the time I didn't. I was just stunned that anybody ever had something like that happen. Well, then what happened was time went by, fast forward now to 2020, Paul passes away, fast forward to about 2021, sometime in that, and a dear friend who I've known since she was a child. I know this woman, and she is very upstanding, an honest Christian mother. She's got a grandchild now. She's not nuts. Anyway, I get a message from her, Donna, I need to talk to somebody. And you're the only one I can talk to. I think that nobody else will believe me, but I got to talk to somebody about something that happened. So she knows me, who I am. So I'm like, okay, sure, you can tell me anything. I'll understand. And I'm expecting her to say she saw Bigfoot or she saw a UFO or something like that. And she says, I was stalked by a werewolf. And I'm like, are you sure? She's, I was stalked by a werewolf. So I was like, it's okay. It's okay. I believe you. I don't know what happened. I don't know what it was. I don't know how to explain it, but I believe you. And I told her, I'll pray for you. I'll always pray for you. I'll pray for you. I'll pray for your family forever. I love you guys. And I believe you. And that was that. And it really troubled me, because I know now there's two stories. Now Connie's son-in-law has told me a story, and now she's told me a story, my good friend, and I'm like, something's to this. Well, I mean, it bothered me a lot, but I was thinking, well, thank God I never saw anything like that. Thank God I had other experiences, but I thank God that didn't happen to me. So what happened was I kept thinking about that, I kept thinking about what happened to her, and it was really, really troubling me, but I couldn't get it out of my mind. So then I was actually a moderator on another Facebook page for somebody that was a Sasquatch page, and I really enjoyed that. But people kept talking about Dogman, and I'm like, what are they talking about, Dogman? This is crazy. And so I started researching it, and it brought me to Vic Cundiff, Dogman Radio Encounters. And I'm like, oh, okay, let's check this thing out. And I started listening to stories that people would on your podcast, and I was like, what? Oh my goodness. Is this what she saw? Is this what he saw in Louisiana? Is this what she saw? She lived in the southern part of Arizona. I'm like, this is what she saw. And this has to be what they saw. So this thing is real. This is real. And I wanted to call her and tell her to contact you. So I did get in touch with her, and I said, I need to call you. And she said, okay. So I called her, and I asked her about how she was doing, and she just told me that she was doing okay, and that she said she thought about it, and she thought, yeah, that couldn't be real. So her family had talked to her about getting in touch with somebody about it, and she went to a therapist, and they said, well, yeah, you're having hallucinations, and they just diagnosed her with having hallucinations. And that just broke my heart, because by this time I know that what she saw was very real, and now she's under the care of some, medical thing, the mental thing, and that just broke my heart, because I didn't feel at that time she was ready for me to push her to think that, no, it really was real. So I just kind of let that go for the time being. And I continue to listen to your podcasts. Oh, I forgot to mention, though, back after this happened, I drew those hands, those werewolf hands. I kept drawing them. I couldn't stop drawing them. I draw them over and over and over, trying to get it just right so I could show Paul, this is what they were. No, this is a little off. I got to draw them again. And I kept obsessing on drawing them. Anyway, back to the 2000s now. So about a while back, I was listening to all your past podcasts, listening to all these people, and a girl came on there on one of them, and she's talking about stuff that happened to her. And this girl is talking about stuff that happened right around the year 2000. And all the stuff she's talking about, it kind of resonates with my own experience with so-called haunting. And she starts talking about where this happened. And when she says where it happened, as I told you, I don't want to give the city name up, because I can expose some people to possible ridicule, and I don't want to do that. But I will say those two cities are so close to each other that, like I said, you could spit from one town to the next. And it's almost like part of the border goes through an avocado orchard. Like, there's the border of this and that. And you could put one foot in that town and one foot in this town. And they were so connected that it was hard to tell where one started and where one stopped. And when I realized that everything that happened to her happened at the same time, in the same basic vicinity, that it just hit me in the gut. I went, oh, like that, and just grabbed my gut, because I realized, oh no, oh no, oh no. Holy moly macaroni. That's when I knew. That was the windows, the slobber. And that's when it hit me. It just hit me like, oh my gosh, my brain is ready to say that was in the window, not the mirror. Of course it was in the mirror because the mirror was reflecting what was in the window. Just as sure as the mirror was reflecting me standing there, it was reflecting those claws reaching in through the window. Within inches of the back of it could have just grabbed me and yanked me out of that window so fast. It just dug its terrible claws deep in my flesh and yanked me out. And that's when I realized, holy moly, all this time, it was real. That's what mirrors do. Mirrors don't show you what's inside the mirror, moving around in the mirror. Mirrors show you what's on the outside of the mirror being reflected. That thing was right behind me that whole time. And that's when I realized that everything came around. Everything that had never been closed came full circle. And everything, all the pieces fit. Everything made sense. Everything that happened, even the animals, the stuff I didn't tell you about when the plants would move around, just stuff that everything just said, I just knew. And then I just sunk because I realized I thought I left all that behind me, hundreds of miles away and 20 years behind me. And now this is something that could be lurking anywhere. It's in Arizona. It's in Norway. It's in Utah. It's everywhere. Not just it, but its kind. Those kinds of things. Those dogmen, they are wherever they are. They could be in Florida. They could be in anywhere. It could be in China. I mean, it doesn't matter. So you can't just pick up and move to a new location and be 100 miles away from where that one was and not expect to ever have them out there. They're out there. And that was like I was ruined. I was just ruined. It's like I couldn't cope with it. Of course, I talked to my brother, the only one I ever talked to about stuff like this. I have two brothers, but the brother I'm referring to is Bill, who lives in California, but he always gives me his support and his listening ear. And he's had his own share of experiences in his life, but nothing like this. But, oh my gosh, it just killed me. But then I also knew I had been protected because it didn't get me, but it wanted to, or maybe it didn't want to. I don't know if they get a sick satisfaction from scaring people. I don't know if they're territorial and they're trying to scare people away from their territory, or if they feed off of the human fear hormone that we emit. I don't know. But whatever it was that they do, whatever, I was ruined. And now I can't imagine what my little friend went through, being stalked by one, when she was stalked by one. I can't imagine, because what I felt when I found out what really happened, what was really going on with that guest house, yeah, that did it for me. But it came full circle. And then when I talked to you the first time and you said, yeah, because I was still in denial. There was a piece of me that wanted to say, oh, that was a haunting with werewolf components. Like, what haunting has werewolf components? That's kind of just searching for anything you can stick your hands on or put your mind to that can push this and make this an impossibility, but yet, it happened. You know what it was. I know those hands were reaching through that window, not inside the mirror. It was real. And my brain just was not going to process it at that moment. And I think I've read about and heard about our brains protecting us in certain times, not allowing us to comprehend certain things, not allowing us to remember certain things as a protection. And I think that's what was probably happening when my brain was saying, oh, look what's in the mirror. Look what's my brain wasn't about to say, look what's in the window behind you. Just like the song kept saying, look behind you. There's someone behind you. Look behind you. And then it was like, yeah, there's someone behind me. All right. And I left. I didn't want to go back, but I did. But I didn't have to stay for long after that. We only had 3 weeks left of work in there before we got to leave. And I just made sure I was with Paul more often and didn't stay down there by myself anymore, and went up to the grandma's house with him every day and stuck close with him. I still wasn't comfortable, but at least I was with him and with other people instead of being by myself down there at the guest house. That's what happened. Basically, that's my story, my experience.
Wow, Donna, no one should ever have to experience anything like that. That is rough. If you've had a Dogman encounter and would like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest on one of my 2 Bigfoot shows, please go to mybigfootsighting.com. Your encounter happened while you and your husband Paul were staying at that guest house in California. How far would you say that guest house was from the nearest neighboring home, though?
Probably an acre of ground. I think pretty much each home up there was on an acre or 2. It wasn't a gated community, but it was like a gated community, and like everybody had big gates and wrought iron gates, but there was probably an acre or 2 in between each home, and then as you gradually went up the hill, it was windy, and then there'd be a home, and then there'd be a place of just nothing but trees and orchards, and then bend around a corner, and there'd be another home back I'd say about an acre at the least between each home.
So if you had to guess, you would say probably 150 feet, 200 feet then between the homes?
No, I'd say about 300 to 400 feet at least. Let's see, Leroy is over here to my west, and there's about 320 feet long fence. So they would be further away from that house. The next house over would have been further than my neighbor is from me. So I'm thinking 300 to 400 feet. And it would all be studded with trees and stuff.
So that guest house was pretty isolated then.
Yeah, it was not near the main house. It was higher up. And that one was probably about 100, 150 feet away. And they were not close together. They had a lot of land. Their backyards were big.
It sounds like they were. Yeah, I get that picture.
Expensive place to live.
Oh, I'm sure it was if it had a guest home. That's a given. Well, Donna, we're about out of time, and I've got tons of questions for you to ask you about that experience. Would you be open to coming back next week to do a part 2 so I could ask you those questions?
Sure. No problem at all.
Great. Let's just plan on doing that then. So I'll get back with you to get that scheduled. We'll record that part 2. And then, we'll just air that next Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time.
Oh, that sounds very good. I'll be happy to answer anything. I just want to help people. And I hope that my little friend who had that experience, I hope to God that she hears this show so that she can know and stop to think about maybe she should contact you after all.
Well, there's no pressure for her to do that, but if she does reach out to me, I'd be more than happy to try and help her however I could. So, if she's listening, please remember that. Having said that, Donna, thanks again so much for coming on and sharing this experience with us. And like we've already established, we'll be back next week, Friday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Time for part 2 to throw all those questions at you. But thanks again so much for your time and have a great night.